And so if we take these two things off the list, right, the naturally occurring phenomena and the idea that the pilots themselves are lying, then we come back to the two possibilities that I think exist. The first of those is that it could have been military in origin. The United States has a long history of using the southwestern portion of our country for military tests. And we even have an example of this on this show. We've covered the first ever nuclear test, which was done in New Mexico. And then, of course, you've also got Area 51, and then the larger S4, which is made famous by Bob Lazar, if you're familiar with him. And both of those are also in the southwestern United States. And so, simply put, the pilots of Flight 2292 could have definitely seen a military test. It could have been a military test flight. That absolutely, I think, is a simple explanation of what they could have seen. Some sort of military test flight that they were not supposed to see. However, it's also possible that maybe they were supposed to see it. The United States could have decided to fake some sort of alien, sort of, I guess, interception of that flight or whatever you would call it. They could have definitely tried to fake a UFO encounter, but it's funny because I've always thought that could be a thing that our government could do if we wanted to. Like, we could definitely fake an alien landing. I mean, with some of the secret shit that I'm sure we have, and then if you combined that with, like, have you ever seen Hollywood makeup artists? Or, like, at this point, honestly, like, the people from YouTube could do it. Like, if you give Jeffree Star that job, that dude's knocking it out in like the first half of an afternoon, and you would have no idea. They would come down on some plane you've never seen, and I mean, think about it. Like, have you like, do you know what secret planes the military has? Like, me either. That's the point. Like, who the hell knows what they have? Half the stuff that they already have looks alien. I can't even imagine what the secret stuff looks like. So I think it doesn't actually point to the simplest explanation, but I mean, I guess that's kind of a sidebar. But I think if the U.S. government wanted to fake an alien landing, they absolutely could. But anyway, military test flight could possibly be an option, and the option of a military explanation is interesting when you learn, as I did, that the sighting happened about 400 miles away from the Army's White Sands missile range in New Mexico. Then again, that offers up the uncomfortable reminder that the pilot did describe a cruise missile type of thing. That was his wording. And they were 400 miles away from a missile range. So, if right now you're thinking, well, 400 miles away, how far can a missile travel? Don't worry, I thought the same thing and I looked it up. And a Tomahawk cruise missile has a range of approximately 1,500 miles. So, yeah, that American Airlines flight was in range, especially for a major fuck up. If you don't think that the United States military fucks up sometimes, I sadly have to remind you that they definitely do. And it brings me no joy to point these things out. I'm not trying to like be on here and be funny when I point these things out. I'm not trying to like dunk on the United States military like I hate you. I love the United States of America. I think of myself as a patriotic person. But I do think in the context of what we're talking about here, it is important that we consider something like that. So, for the real hardliners that don't think our military ever fucks up, let me point you to a recent example that is no further back than the years 2008 to 2016. Because under the Obama administration, the United States killed over 300 civilians in drone strikes that were conducted in the Middle East. In one specific instance, we used Hellfire missiles to kill 12 men and injure at least 15 others in Yemen. Of course, one of those 15 wounded was the bride. That's right, the bride. Because we fucked up and accidentally lit up a wedding with missiles that cost $150,000 each. That's right. Every single Hellfire missile that we have costs $150,000 of your taxpayer money, just in case you were curious. Then, of course, there's 9/11, where the United States Air Force failed to intercept 4 planes after having perfectly intercepted every single test flight throughout the year up until that point. We went over 4 on that one. And of course, that depends on what you think happened with Flight 93 over Shanksville, Pennsylvania. I know it's not completely related, but if you're for some reason shocked and upset by what I'm saying in regards to 9/11, I do think you need to understand that those 2 particular instances that I'm speaking to are not really all that controversial. I hate to be the person to break that to you, but the data is absolutely available and has been covered extensively on the 100% accuracy rate of interceptions in that year on the test flights. And also, the journalist Garrett M. Graff has done great work. Sorry, I had to get a drink there. He's done great work on through his book and for Politico on the subject of Flight 93, where he documented the discussions between high-level government officials about shooting down Flight 93 while it was in the air and presumably headed towards Washington, D.C. Those discussions actually happened. They were actually talking about shooting it down. And that it just is a fact. I would encourage anyone that's interested in this, as I'm saying this, or anyone that wants to get upset with me right now, both of you, if you think this is interesting, or if you're pissed at me right now for some reason, I would encourage you to look up his writing. I think his Politico piece is called "Oral 9/11 Oral History," or something like along those lines. Or that might be the book, but anyway, if you look up the author's name and something along those lines, you'll be able to find what I'm talking about. But those, like I said, those discussions actually happened, and the wreckage is also interesting because it's not really like a lot of plane crash wreckage that you see. So once again, I'm sorry I'm off track again, but just anyway, if that's something that interests you, I would suggest you look into it. But like I said, well documented those 2 things. So sorry if that offends anyone, but those 2 elements are well documented. The point that I'm making overall, though, I still think is important, and that is that our military fucks up sometimes. So it could totally be that as well. Maybe it was a missile test that didn't do exactly what it's supposed to do, or maybe it did, and they didn't realize that this flight was coming in. I have no idea, but that seems like a fuck up that could absolutely happen. And if we're looking at Occam's razor, pretty simple explanation for what those guys saw up there. But then again, according to CBS News, a Pentagon spokesperson said, quote, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, that's a freaking mouthful, known as DARPA, the Missile Defense Agency, and U.S. Strategic Command didn't conduct any tests from the missile range Sunday. Look, to me, Occam's razor would say that a pilot seeing a missile-shaped object fly over his plane 400 miles away from a missile range, combined with the long documented history of classification of military information in this country, well, that would point to a clear explanation of a fuck up on a missile test and then a subsequent denial of that fuck up by the people that were involved in it. So now basically the validity of the military explanation just boils down to how likely you are to believe that the United States military lies to us at a minimum through omission and classification. That's a personal choice I think you have to make as the person listening, but I do think that if you think they're lying, then I actually see it as a very simple explanation of what this was.